Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I hope everything is okay in your life. This video series has been prepared for general features of the classes in BDO to be conveyed to you by the Classmasters in appropriate way. The information contained in this video is limited and will not be a detailed guide. In the content you will meet, there will be an interview about the structure of the class in general. If you have friends around you who have questions about this class, they will probably be able to find general answers. The purpose of interview is to convey the class to you in a short and fun way. First, you will watch official trailer of the class, then we will start chatting with our guests. During the chat, I will add as many images as possible and try to provide you with a better information transfer. I hope you enjoy this content. All these and similar classes will be completed and published in time. If you do not want to miss the moment when they are published, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button. Enjoy watching. Alright, welcome guys. Today's guest is Anfield. Welcome Anfield, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
May you please introduce yourself? Who is Anfield?
I am a BDO streamer. I've been playing BDO since the EU launch, back on what was originally the Croxus server, where I started playing my class Ranger, and I still play her today, so it's over 6 years.
So how did you find BDO? From a friend or website? How did you go into MMORPG games? How did you decide to play this game?
Well, I've always played MMOs for a very long time. It's one of the earliest genres of gaming that I did, aside from like my little Game Boy playing Pokemon Blue. But I found BDO because I remember seeing an advertisement for the game's customization, which was like so far ahead of anything at that time. This was like very early alpha BDO they were showing off. And then another friend of mine said that, oh, that game's actually coming out. This was much later. And I was like, oh, well, let's play it. So I ended up picking it up there.
Do you think your class is newbie friendly? How would you rate your class out of 10 in terms of difficulty in PvE, also PvP?
Well, I main Awakening Ranger, and for Awakening Ranger, it's not a very newcomer-friendly class. It's very high input. I would say you want more of a streamlined class, maybe if you're a new player, unless you're really looking for a challenge. Succession Ranger is much easier to play, though, and so that was definitely the sort of newcomer approach. And this applies both for PvE and for PvP, although if you are PvPing in large scale with Succession Ranger, although mechanically not that difficult, it's so unprotected and vulnerable. That does add an element of difficulty because your positioning has to be perfect.
So do you prefer Awakening or Succession right now, and why?
I prefer Awakening because I like the more agency you get with the kit. It's much better protected, so you can look after yourself. I feel like oftentimes there's nothing more frustrating than having nothing you can have done to sort of save your life. Where Succession is very cool because you get like the big damage and you can really hit people hard. But the thing is, people know that, and unlike maybe say Archer is a better example of a class that is still has that sort of range punch, but can protect itself a little bit better, although still can be vulnerable. Succession Ranger is kind of frustrating for that reason for me. Although there are Rangers that were Awakening Rangers before Succession. Rylock, who's an excellent Ranger, and he plays Succession. He loves it. But for me, Awakening is more interesting to play, I think, as well.
So I published a PvE tier list video, and there is a page related with Ranger. May you please analyze this page?
Yeah, so I mean, early game spots, every class pretty much one-shots, and it's just really about your mobility. Your AoE is also important. Succession Ranger definitely has the upper hand on Awakening there, but Awakening Ranger, you can sort of spam Waltz of Wind. As long as you do something about the mana, you're okay. Crowded spots, I would give Succession the edge here, although Awakening is not bad at different spots like Hystria, Achman, maybe Sakraya as well. And then when you're looking at endgame spots, I think Awakening Ranger, it's incredibly high APM and can be exhaustive to grind at endgame, but it is effective at certain spots like Olans, Gyfin, maybe Trolls. Any spot that has very tanky mobs, Awakening Ranger is quite good at, but Succession is definitely, 2 stars may even be generous. It doesn't necessarily lack damage, it doesn't position itself very easily, and a lot of that comes down to your skill modifiers like back attacks, which give you 150% damage modifier. So if you can't get that, you lose damage. As for mobility, 2 stars for Succession. You basically, in order to move a Succession Ranger, you put your weapon away and you sprint. And then for Awakening, you just have to dash. The dash is unprotected most of the time when it's not iframe, but that's okay in PvE, so it's fast enough. It used to be slower, but they buffed it in the reboot, so durability wise, Awakening Ranger is actually, I would say 3 stars, maybe a little bit harsh. She has ways to move behind mobs quite quickly with Waltz of Wind. She has a PvE iframe that you can spam, Evasive Explosive Shot, if that ever gets into a problem. It's a PvP iframe on 2 hops, but in PvE it's unlimited PvE iframe. And because actually technically it does do damage, and this is true of Succession too, you could actually technically just kill things while fully in iframe. You would run out of mana probably, unless you had a lot of offset for that. But I think that she's she's not tanky, she's not a striker, she doesn't have a block, but she does have ability to dodge damage, and like I said, if things really get heavy, just EES to get your HP back. Succession does take more damage, I think, because like I said earlier, she doesn't position very well, so a lot of the mobs are going to be always in front of you doing damage to you, whereas Awakening can quickly get behind them and stuff. So
okay, actually why I gave 3 stars on Awakening or Succession is also very low. Your Ranger is very fragile, maybe most fragile class in the game. When you CC'd by Olan, for example, death is almost certain. Yeah, that's why I put on 3 stars.
Yeah, okay, in that case, it depends obviously on your gear. I can go to Olans and be CC'd and live, but I think obviously, you could start doing Olans at 340 DP, many classes do. In fact, you can technically do it in seasonal gear, but that's another thing. But she's quite squishy. Not the squishiest, Archer would be squishier, Tamer squishier, but she's squishy.
So you summarized very well, thank you. So let's talk about in details. May you please give us a bit information about Awakening PvE, early game spots, one-shot type, mid-game spots, more like you need to pull mob, Sakraya, Stars and Blood Ministry, Orcs, and etc. And end-game spots like Gyfin, Olun, Hexe.
The dash is fast enough that you're going to be okay moving between packs. You just have to check your stamina really, but ultimately at early game spots, you can just spam a skill called Waltz of Wind and it'll do enough damage. You can throw in other skills, Breezy Blade, Rushing Wind. If you really want to, you can throw in some other Awakening skills, but Waltz will pretty much kill everything because those spots are designed to be one hit pretty much. As for things like Achman, Hystria, Sakraya, Achman not too great just because the mobs aren't as compact, and Awakening really relies on compact mobs, which is why Sakraya is so good, because Sakraya, the mobs don't get CC'd, so get stuck in position when you're trying to group them, and then they group very quickly, which is great for Awakening Ranger. Hystria, you have that problem a little bit where the mobs get stunned because they behave in a different way, so if your skill has knockdown on it, because you can't knock down Hystria mobs, they actually get stunned instead, so it can be a bit annoying to group mobs that way. She's not bad at those kind of spots. Thornwood, for example, would be like a spot that she would struggle at because the mobs kind of like CCing all the time. 1v1, so anything that CCs a lot. Like, I like grinding Turos, but I don't always grind it because, well, it's bad money, unfortunately, but also the mobs just spam CCs, so you have to be very careful with that. But I have found success at endgame spots because she does have, when the mobs are very tanky and you're focused pretty much on one main mob, like you kind of are at Gyfin or at Olin's, she's very good because she applies a ton of debuffs to the mobs. She can buff herself a lot. She's very good at anti-evasion, which is very good in PvP, obviously, but also in PvE, because a lot of endgame spots have good evasion. So she's very good there, and her DPS sort of comes online over a period of time rather than in an initial burst.
So what about PvP, Awakening? 1v1 potential, 1vx, 5v5, I mean, I don't know, Solar maybe, and also large scale.
Yeah, Awakening Ranger is very good at 1v1. She deals very well. She's very much a bait class. Because she lacks mobility that a lot of classes have these days, she more relies on almost like setting a trap. You're like a little Venus flytrap. You're waiting for the fly to come in, and then you're sort of inviting pressure, if that makes sense. Classes will come in and pressure you, and you will be able to use close range mobility skills. She doesn't move far, but she can move in short spaces very well. And she has a combination of 2 core iframes and then a third one that's a little bit more of an emergency one that she can use to sort of evade grabs and things like that. So she's very much a very fantastic 1v1 class when it comes to especially dealing with melee classes. And you have to be very experienced. I'm very experienced on Ranger, but I'm very far from the best Ranger. So a lot of players, for example, I have friends on NA that play Ranger, the likes of like Flannels, Swift, John. These guys are just insane at Awakening Ranger, and you can see what they can do. It's really fun to watch, especially if you know the class well enough to know how well they're playing. But she's very good at that kind of stuff. She does struggle against ranged classes. It's kind of ironic that Ranger is bad against ranged classes, but because of her mobility issues I touched upon earlier, those classes don't have to come close to you to engage you. So and any suck caster can be difficult for a Ranger in a 1v1, at least not because of the slows as well, but also, for example, a Suck Wizard is quite slippery if you're not a very fast class due to split TP and stuff like that, and they're always slowing you. They apply a lot of protected CCs. Awakening Zerker, they can CC you from range, is protected and does damage, so that's very fun. But DK Awakening is probably the hardest class for an Awakening Ranger to 1v1, I would say, due to the range pressure, the slipperiness of the class and stuff like that. Archer obviously difficult. In 3v3s, I think she's very comp reliant. In the arena, middling success. The best Rangers in the world in NA, I would say, are doing okay. Like Flannels is up there, but even he's struggling to beat people that are just sort of like chilling on Musa, So in 3v3s, I think the issue with Awakening Ranger is obviously the way the arena works is that obviously if you CC someone, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to kill that person because they have allies, right? But when Awakening Ranger damages all forward guards, so you lock yourself in position to do your forward guard damage, which in 1v1 is obviously fine, but in 3v3s, enemies come around you. So a lot of times you have to sort of play off of it being a CC bot, which relies on you having teammates that do super armor damage for you to kill your targets. But she has good tools for that. She has a KD grab. She's very strong. It's not ranged, but it's KD, so that's huge. It's the best CC in the game. And then you have skill enhancement called Fury Arrow, which is a rapid fire knockback. So if you get a good position, you can just shoot knockbacks into your enemies while they're trying to do stuff for your teammates, and that can really set things up too. Especially now that knockback is a 0.7 CC, not a 1 point. Large scale PvP Awakening Ranger, there's not loads you can do. You could maybe put her on like utilities, so like defending cannons, anti-cannon, things like that. She's good at that kind of skirmishing role, although you could argue that you'd rather have some other classes potentially there, so kind of unfortunate for her. Most Rangers would just swap to Succession for large scale PvP.
What about Succession PvE?
Succession PvE is very good at early game. I use it to sometimes right now Centaurs is kind of cracked if you have Agris, and although I have very good gear and I can grind almost any grind spot I wanted to, even Crypt if I really wanted to, I would still sometimes just go and burn Agris for my 800 million an hour without thinking at Centaurs. I also love Valencia, so that helps. And the reason that I go Succession for that is because she has very good AoEs. Those mobs, you one hit them, very, very low AP because they're AP capped anyway. So you could have 300 AP. It doesn't make a difference anyway, even if they were tankier. So you can go there very low AP. You can go there with a seasonal Succession Ranger and just absolutely easily one-shot. Yeah, that's so sometimes I'll just do that because her AoE is so big with Descending Current. You can easily grind spots like that, no problem. Her only issue is mobility, so you have to put your weapon away and sprint. She does have a 10% passive, woohoo, where you put your weapon away and sprint to mobility, so yay. So my advice in that case would actually just be using movement speed add-ons and things like that. Make sure your movement speed is at level 5. But yeah, Succession, very good early game PvE. The only thing is, like I said, is mobility, but realistically, most grind spots is not a big issue. If you're at Polyforest, the packs aren't that spread out, so you can just kill those. Any of the potion grinding spots, it's not like big spread out. Only really Centaurs has spread out packs where her mobility is somewhat of an issue. As for like crowded spots, it kind of depends. If you're grinding Elvia and Serendia, quite good, because if you have a weapon, Succession Ranger just cleans house. So Orcs, for example, with an Elvia weapon on Succession Ranger, it's just easy peasy. I mean, every class pretty much one-shots once they get a weapon, but the ability to just spray out this AoE with like Descending Current, which is like the sort of core AoE she has, it's just so nice. When she doesn't have it, it's not as good. So you have like sort of half an hour of bliss and half an hour of like, meh, this is okay, I guess. As for endgame spots, Succession Ranger struggles because a lot of these grind spots rely on you getting the absolute maximum out of your damage as you can. In order to do that, you have to do back attacks, which is something that Ranger has recently had fixed in the reboot, where actually we couldn't back attack mobs before unless we were physically like no space between us and the back of the mob, which meant we couldn't back attack the entire pack like other classes could. Now that's been fixed. But the problem for Succession Ranger is she doesn't move very well, so she can't get behind mobs to actually get advantage of that 150% modifier. If you can, some mobs can be knocked on the floor, although not many endgame mobs that come to mind do that. So back attacks are huge, and she doesn't really get advantage of that, and you can't really spam Tearing Arrow into mobs, which is a big powerful ability she has, because it's unprotected and mobs will just mostly CC you. So, and that is another issue too. She's not that well protected. So
what about Succession PvP?
Suck PvP is such a weird one. With the way the game is right now in the meta, classes are so fast that she's incredibly vulnerable in large-scale PvP. This means you need a couple factors going in your favor. Your guild probably needs to be the one that's on top. She doesn't really thrive when your guild is a little bit under the pressure and you're losing a fight, because she needs a lot of space, and you get space by being able to control fights, and guilds that are stronger therefore do that. If you're uncapped PvP, she needs a lot of gear, because if you're not doing damage, you're not doing anything. She doesn't really provide anything if it's not damage. But in the right circumstances, she can thrive. She has a lot of damage. When that damage is realized, it's very threatening. So it can be very satisfying, and a lot of people like that sort of play style. So it's very good. But I would say that it is has a variance whether it's going to be successful or not. And it does come down to the Succession Ranger player themselves. Awakening is incredibly difficult because mechanically it's difficult to play compared to many classes, whereas Succession is actually mechanically relatively easy to play. It's just very difficult to position yourself. So there's an element of difficulty there. She's very vulnerable in 1v1, so most people don't even bother. She can 1v1 some classes, provided there's lots of room. You have to gauge the movement perfectly on those classes, but there's classes that you have no chance. I wouldn't even bother. And then 3v3s, I think we can see in Solar, there's no ranking Suck Rangers that have gotten that high. I think Hazy got the highest on NA. He's very good at Succession, but still just massively struggling in 3s. So that's sort of where she's at, unfortunately.
Okay, definitely. STR for Siege is nodes, and remain part is struggling.
Yeah.
So I think you summarized all Ranger enough and very well. So let's talk about game itself. You are one of the most experienced streamer and gamer for BDO. You are very old. And what are you thinking about BDO's current situation from past until now?
Well, I think the game has massively improved over the years in almost all aspects. I think the quality of life rates have been very, very good. I think we have a lot of things to sort of look at and be like, well, this is way better than it used to be. Some things are like improvements that you could question whether they've actually been good for the game or not, depending on your outlook. An example of that is like many years ago in 2017, you would be grinding, or 16 even, Sazens or Pirates. So basically, it were two viable, worthwhile grinding spots in the game. So this meant that it was overcrowded, subject to heavy levels of griefing. But I do remember there being far more GVGs back then. And so one of the problems with having so many optional grind spots that are all very, very good is that you spread players out more and there's less conflict to you lead to GVGs. Now, if you're not a PvP player, that's excellent because you not only have that, you also have your Marnie zone for an hour. So all that stuff is really good. And even as a PvP player myself, I have to admit that sometimes it's nice just to chill and make the gains I want to make, especially as a streamer, because sometimes people like coming for streamers. It is what it is. Part and parcel with stream sniping is what it is. It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen very extreme levels sometimes. And I've seen this in other streamers. So kind of nice to have so many options to grind if you want to. So that's kind of like a mixed bag as well. But in general, I think the game is massively improved. I think we have a lot more content, a lot more quality of life. So they're mostly good stuff. The only thing that I could say is that I think PvP's been kind of neglected in some ways. It took this long to get the arena. So, and I do enjoy the arena. I hope that they don't abandon it. And I hope that it gets improvements to not only class balance that needs to be addressed. Because my biggest issue in PvP, which is a mechanic aside from like just, class stuff like mobility, is resistances. I know I share this view with many PvPers. Keaton and myself are very much on this crusade. We hate resistances. RNG in PvP makes no sense to me, especially if, as I believe, CC should be unprotected. If you risk a CC and be unprotected and get punished because they resist and they counter CC you, that's very unfair, especially if you're even outside of arena. If you're looking at normal PvP and just get kind of wrecked because obviously the time to kill is very small in BDO. So 1 CC and that's it for you usually. So if that comes down to a dice roll, I think that's very unfair.
So, if you have a chance to add a new feature to BDO or change something, what would it be?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very difficult question. There's lots of things that I could probably come up with. It's one of those things people ask you those questions. And even though you told me this was something that you would ask, I still don't really know. But like sometimes you'll just be chilling there and you'll be like, oh yeah, that. So like the other day I was thinking life skills, even though I don't do many life skills, are kind of a little bit neglected sometimes by PA. And I'd like some different things that are more interactive for life skills. Recently I've been playing classic WoW games. And one thing I like about that is that I have herbalism, which is obviously just like gathering in BDO. But with BDO, you know where things are going to be and you just go and gather one single spot. And that's what you do mindlessly over and over again. I like the idea that you can sort of travel and find really rare ones that can spawn. We have that in BDO kind of with, I don't know how to say this, but Lacairo. I don't know how to say those things. Anyway, I used to call them Lacari plants. But Lacari's long been gone anyway. So they put you into sort of like a minesweeper game, which isn't fun. But I like the idea that you can run around the world and find really rare nodes for like gathering, whether it be mining or plants or something. So for life skillers, I'd like to see something more interactive because that would get me more into life skilling. I actually did more life skilling because of the mansion update. I have a mansion. I really like it. I decorated it how I wanted it to, and I actually worked on life skills for the first time in a long time. So that's another thing that could really reinvigorate that side of BDO that I feel like is like sort of been neglected since the Manos update. By the way, I want a mansion somewhere else. I hate Serenity. It's boring. Give me a mansion in like Mountain of Eternal Winter or Odalita or somewhere like that. Or Valencia, actually.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah. Aside from that, I don't know. To be honest with you, there's so many things that I guess you could just go down a list. Before tier 10 horses were added, I like mounts in games. So I really wanted, I don't know if you play Pokemon, but they have the shiny Pokemon, which are like a super rare odds. Before tier 10 was added, I thought that would be cool for PA to add like a shiny horse, which is where you get a different skin for tier 9 at the time, because there was no tier 10s. So I don't know if you know, we have the Nightmare Pegasus, which is just a black skinned Pegasus. It looks very cool. Only 2 of them exist on each server. So it would be kind of cool if you were like going for a tier 9 horse, and instead of getting the standard look, you could just proc a really rare one. That could be still something added into the game in a different way, but that would be cool. I like mounts, so more variance in mounts is good. I like the tier 10s, although the tier 10 unicorn for me was very disappointing because I like the tier 9, but
I agree.
I like that, yeah. Well, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the water walking ability is kind of a cool niche, but it's so limited, and it doesn't, what use would that be? And the appearance, I really don't like the appearance of it. I think the tier 9 looks great, but anyway, we'll see what the Doom brings. We may see that in the Heidel Ball, I'm not sure, but so I have there's lots of like little things like that. I like goals to work on in games, so like that's why I said the mansion was great for me. More horse related stuff. We're supposed to get it this Wednesday, but apparently there's no patch update this Wednesday. We're getting just maintenance. Korea got it last week, but there's a big horse overview where you can find tier 8 horses in the wild. That's pretty cool. I think that's good for new players. New tier 10 Pegasus skin, which is interesting. Weird looking, but yeah. So I like things to work on. More treasure items, that kind of thing. That's what I like. So
what are your advices for newbie or returnee players or whoever wants to re-roll the Ranger?
Depending on which spec you play, just keep in mind that the fun of the class, especially for Awakening, might not immediately be apparent, and it might take a little bit of perseverance to really get through. But once you really understand Awakening Ranger, you'll see why people, despite it not always being like sort of in the meta, people will stick to it and play it because it is incredibly fun, fluid, And the style is just something that you don't really get with many other classes. I think Awakening DK might be the closest. Succession Ranger is all about that sort of support backline, big hitting. It's very easy to get into and learn, and it might feel really satisfying to play early game. So I would highly recommend trying that out if you're interested in Ranger in any way. Is that Succession is just so easy to sort of get into, especially PvE. And if you get into a tier 1 guild, which is what I recommend for any new players, is to join a tier 1 node war guild so you can dip your feet in capped PvP very quickly and sort of learn. And I think because BDO lacks a sort of dungeon raid accomplishment that you get with other games, I mean, we have Ataraxian, but it's not really the same. I think that accomplishing something, even if you're not initially a PvP player with your guild when in a more relaxed setting, is something I highly recommend. So if you join BDO and maybe play through a season, consider joining a tier 1 guild that can sort of show you the ropes, because it's some of the most fun you'll have, and some of the my most memorable moments in BDO are from PvP, because the game doesn't really offer that in PvE, in my opinion. So that's sort of my advice, is just don't be afraid of PvP. Everybody starts somewhere, and I think that the more people in PvP, the better it is as well. So that's always something that's good as well. But in general, ask questions, because I'm sure you do it the same on your stream. I do it, I don't mind new player questions. Sometimes BDO chats sort of die down because everybody's playing BDO while they have the stream on the side. So it becomes like a podcast, but if you don't have anything to talk to about people, so it's nice to have questions. We love having questions, so don't be afraid to ask questions.
So we are coming towards the end of the interview, and is there anything you would like to add?
Not that comes to mind specifically, just that if you're interested in Ranger, you can always ask me any questions you want on stream. There is a Ranger Discord. It's lots of helpful information. I have information on my YouTube channel for Ranger guides and stuff, most recent being the reboot videos I did for Succession and Awakening, where, like I said earlier, I'm not the greatest Ranger, but I know enough, and obviously I have friends that are very, very, very good players, and so I like to have guests on, like kind of doing now in a different way. And so the Awakening one has Finals, which is who is arguably the best Ranger in the world at the moment, and then you have Succession. I have Jay and Rylock helping me with those as well, very good Succession Rangers. So those are good guides if you're looking to get into the class, but you can also ask any follow-up questions on my stream.
Okay, I want to add something. Guys, Anfield is one of the most experienced and older player in BDO, and also streamer for BDO. You should definitely check his stream and guides on YouTube, and you will not regret. Trust me. I'm mostly looking his streams, sometimes going in Pepega in his chat, and it's very funny, and he's helping people a lot. I want to say thank you so much. You accepted my invitation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been fun. I appreciated it.
Alright guys, do not forget, BDO is just a game. Have a nice game.